Rosen, and I'm a Canadian goldsmith working out of my studio here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And today I'm going to talk about rubies, the queen of gems. It is known as the king of gems, but I'm gonna say it's the queen of gems, and I'm gonna tell you in a minute why. So ruby is the birthstone for July. And I was thinking yesterday when I was at the farmer's market, the local farmer's market, I saw some organic local strawberries, and I looked at the color and I thought to myself, no wonder that ruby is the birthstone for July, which is when the strawberries are ripe here, because of that ruby red color. So I was delighted in that and had a bunch of them for breakfast this morning with my grain-free waffles, which I'm happy to send you the recipe. People from my newsletter were really excited about this recipe for the grain-free waffles, which I made up myself. So if you want that recipe, drop me a line. I'll send it to you. So, rubies. So first of all, I want to make a disclaimer. I am not a gemologist, although I do have one on my team. And she straightened me out about the fact that the gem I posted in the announcement for this live is not a ruby. And the reason we know this, she knew this, is because ruby grows as a straight crystal, not a multifaceted one like the one. So I'm sorry about that. I learned something, and now you also learned something. So in Sanskrit, ruby is called Ratna Raj, Ratna being gems and also richness actually, and Raj being king, but again, so it's the king of gems, the queen of gems, mainly because of its hardness. It is second to diamonds, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. Oh, there's always so much to say. And but also because of its rarity. And mystical powers, I suppose. Yes. And just want to mention that it's not only the birthstone for July, but it is also the gemstone for a wedding anniversary of 15 or 40 years. And 40 years. You can give it twice, over that span of time. I think that'll be fair. So ruby is part of the Corundum family of gems, which also includes sapphire, and I've talked about that I think another time. I've written a little article on my website. If you go on the expert advice on my website, you will find in the FAQs, you find a few articles I've written about things like that. So corundum is the mineral, and sapphire is all the colors in there, and ruby is only the really red one. Corundum in itself, without any trace minerals, is colorless actually, and there is, I have colorless sapphire too in my kind of repertoire. And the mineral that makes rubies red is chromium. So when there's chromium present in a corundum, it is then called a ruby. And sometimes there are also other colors, trace minerals. So basically, the more chromium is in there, the more red a ruby will be. The chromium also lends it fluorescence, which makes the intensity of the color more bright. And I'm sorry, I'm still wearing old glasses because my current ones are broken. These are from the 80s, as you can tell, but I can see the screen okay with them. So if it's more like a deep blood red with a slightly bluish hue, that is referred to as Burmese ruby, although that of course now, Burma is now called Myanmar. And that's where the most renowned kind of rubies come from. As well, rubies also come from the Himalayas and from more recently from northern Vietnam, and rubies form in marble. So when there is metamorphic rock being moved, because of the formation of mountains. The existing limestone will create marble, and within that marble is where ruby will occur under the heat and pressure, much like when I was talking about diamonds, heat and pressure makes gems. So today, most rubies today are from Thailand. There's also other countries, Mozambique, Cambodia, Kenya, Madagascar, but most of them are from Thailand. And these countries I mentioned last are generally a little more darker shade because they also contain a little bit of iron. It's nice to see you all. By the way, I recognize several of you. Gohar, who hosted me in Guatemala, which was so wonderful. It's nice to see you here, and many of my friends I see. So thanks for joining. So, and my Uncle Gary just came on. It's always lovely to have these Sundays with you. Thanks for the love. I'm getting hearts. So let me talk a little bit about treatment of rubies. Much like the other corundum gems, sapphire. I should actually say, so the hardest stone is diamond, and the next hardest stone is the corundum family, meaning sapphires of all colors, and rubies, of course. So these are good gems to put in rings because they will hold up a lot longer than softer gems. This relates to the Mohs hardness scale, and maybe I'll do another one of these about Mohs hardness sometime. So what was I talking about? Oh, treatment. So yes. So many gems are treated in very acceptable ways, and corundum, sapphire as well as rubies, are often heat treated. The reason they are heat treated is, and this is a perfectly acceptable treatment of sapphire. So sapphires often have, rubies, corundum gems, often have silk type of inclusions in them. They kind of look like, I was going to show you some images, but then I forgot, honestly. They look a little bit like, lines, like little silky lines. And with the heat treatment, they basically get baked, these gems. And the heat treatment kind of makes them go away. And so perfectly acceptable. It'll also intensify the color a little bit. So most sapphires and most rubies will be heat treated. And that's not a problem at all. It's a very stable treatment, and it is absolutely acceptable. There are other treatments that are not. For example, diffusion or dyeing, adding color, or sometimes there are like fissures in there, like tiny cracks, and they get filled with glass, and like you do just don't do that. Don't buy a glass filled ruby, unless I guess you choose to, but that's not accepted so much. It's accepted, but it has to be disclosed. So that's the treatments. And then of course there are synthetics on the market, and you will know right away because of the price. I keep saying sapphires because it's the same family. Rubies are incredibly rare. Especially it's very rare to find them in larger sizes. They're generally quite small, and very rare. Another time, I think, I also wrote about spinel. It's one of the newer August birthstones that's also very red, and throughout history, spinel was often mistaken for ruby. But part of the clue would be that if the size is really large, it's most likely not a ruby, because, for example, the most expensive ruby I ever sold was 25 carats, and it was almost $1.5 million. So they're very expensive gems, especially as they get larger. And because they're so expensive, so precious, so hard to find, especially in larger sizes, of course, when a gem cutter goes to cut a ruby, the gem, if you can imagine, as I said earlier, they're kind of long sticks of crystals. And rubies, like sapphires, like the other corundum, are pleochroic, meaning they have more than one color. And depending on how you look at this gem, and depending on how it's cut, you will get a slightly different color. So if the gem grows upright, the gem does grow upright like this. And if it's cut this way, so that when you look at it, you look at it from the top of the gem, you will have a much preferred color. It's a color that is preferable. I see some of my colleagues here, and I'm pleased to see you. Hello, my friends. So if you have a ruby that's cut along the perpendicular to the gem, you will have a preferable color. Whereas if it's cut this way, sometimes they cut them like in half, basically they split them. And then they cut them the other way, and that'll make hey Chris, that'll make more of a pinkish, it's not as desirable a color as the ones that are cut this way. But of course the waste will be less. So there's a lot of, the gem cutter will have to really decide. And similarly, when you can imagine the crystals, if you cut a round gem out of a crystal like this way, and my finger is round diameter, but crystals aren't. So if a round gem is cut, then out of a kind of angular thing, you have more waste. So the round gems have more waste than, let's say, an emerald cut or a cushion cut or something like that. So those are all considerations a gem cutter would make when they decide how to cut that ruby. And what else can I say? I have a little cheat sheet, just to make sure I don't forget anything. So the cut really matters. I said that already. And so Ratna Raj is the Sanskrit name. Ratna meaning actually also wealth, and Ratna is signified by red, and also jewels. So that's kind of the same word, and Raj being so it's the king of jewels, and it has to do with life force. I mean, because it's so red, it has to do with blood, and therefore with life force, energy, power, and youth, and those are kind of the qualities of the gem, and it's always been revered. There's probably more that could be said about that. I have only 2 ruby pieces left, plus of course my birthstones in gold. They're always there. This one is a super tiny, that's a 3 3/4 size ring. It's a sterling silver ring with an 18 karat bezel. That's one that's left. That could be a pinky ring, or for somebody with a smaller finger, or, oops, sorry, I touched the mic. This one I'm really quite fond of. I like this one a lot. That's a 1.5 footer, meaning I started with 1.5 feet of sterling silver, forged it, cleaned it, polished it, and then started winding it up. And it has this small princess cut ruby. Princess cuts are hard to cut for gem cutters because they have these corners, and they're also hard to set. But this one is securely in there, and I really am quite fond of that ring. That's a size 7. So that's the only 2 that are left, other than my birthstone stackers in 18 karat. I do have those with rubies, and that's it for today. I hope you're gonna have a splendid day. Yeah, I plan to have a splendid day too. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. If you have any topics you want me to talk about in my live or in my newsletter, which comes out also every Sunday, then do let me know. I'm happy to oblige if I have the knowledge. Thanks so much. Have a great day.